get started, building the drones, what you
Right.
got?
All right, so we have a couple things on the agenda tonight. One, we have to look at asbestos quotes first, and obviously we're going to make a decision, but just want to make you aware of what you're looking at. Then the other thing is our attorneys. Just a little side note to Ryan, I do have a guest coming in for the second part, Kathy from Art, and she'll be here at about 5:30. So.
Okay.
So anyway, while you're waiting to see the bids, a few notes about some of the things that were in the RFP. Once these are approved, there's X amount of days for us to vacate if there's anything usable in there, because they're gonna, the bids are low because they're not gonna do the ceiling that they would if it was an occupied building. So much so we are in the process of vacating all of our usable stuff in there. All the equipment is now out. Due bid came to all the old TVs and stuff like that. All due bid shortly. There was some athletic equipment in there that is all now in the basement here. There's some play props. It's all in the auditorium, so I mean, we made some good progress. There's a good chunk of garbage that we're going to roll off coming shortly, and we'll just start throwing that stuff in.
How about that pole wall? It's
It's there.
in the basement?
No, it's not in the basement. It's in one of the rooms.
Or
We're not moving it. I mean,
Is this the manual arts building that we're
Yes.
talking about?
So anyway, there's short form of the 4 bids in front of you. The first one is outfit out of Duluth. Marble Systems Incorporated. They bid $56,000. There's some unit price schedule below that all of them had to do. If there's any increase, if there's stuff that wasn't specified in the RFP, which I believe they did a pretty thorough job, but in the event that there wasn't, this is how much they would charge over and above it, $56,000. The TSI is any straight pipe that needs to be removed, so that'd be $18 a linear foot for this one. Any fittings, $44 a fitting. Any floor tiles, $4 a square foot. Like I said, I think they did a pretty thorough job in that piece. I don't think there's any of that. So the first one, $56,000. The second one is EnviroBeat out of Minneapolis, $82,000. There's another one. I copied the wrong one, but there should be one for $96,000. The second one, I should have it. I have copied the same one twice. And then the last one is Eco Midwest for $72,000. So my recommendation on Monday is that we go with the outfit out of Duluth for $56,000, which is we'd anticipated about 70, so we're in good shape. 56.
Can we do something with all this for like McNeil? Were they just gonna catalog it, or were they gonna abate that also when we talked about that before?
McNeil, first thing you have to do before you abate that is ask all the catalog, and they did. It was done.
That's what we did like this, early this last spring or something, right?
That was done, and that was a part of
Was
it.
it that late?
Yeah, it was last fall. That was sent out in the RFP so that they all knew, all the companies were aware of what needed to
Right.
be removed. That's what I got there. Go ahead, Red.
Okay, thank you. Well, the last time we met, we'd gone through with 5 different options, and at the end of the meeting, we talked about focusing on 3 of those 5, and taking a look at how we can try to have them be more cost effective, reduce the square footage, the cost that goes along with that. So with that said, I want to jump right in and start talking about those 3. The first one, if you recall, is just to be able to look at what a freestanding new school would cost. No, that cost hasn't changed, of course. That one, it is what it is, as they say. It's fixed, and like I mentioned, that cost is for the building and the site work, not for site acquisition, or any potential infrastructure that would need to be extended for that piece of it. But if you recall, that number was a little over 62 million for that particular option. The next option that we had talked about was looking at a single campus. Okay, there we go. I love technology. That would be located in, the first example would be located in the Eveleth campus. So what we took a look at here, our previous option, we had much more demolition and a lot more new space. So we dove into the floor plans, went to look at the size of your existing classrooms and how adequate they would be for a new space. Really trying to get a feel for the usable square footage versus kind of all in the square footage of your campus. So in doing that, we were able to make some reductions, and what you'll see here is in this case, we're looking at maintaining the current auditorium and the classrooms below that, and then we'd be able to reduce that middle school addition to be a single-story addition instead of, we previously showed 2. We're able to utilize more space within the existing footprint there. And we're also able to take a look at our numbers and have them reflect some of the more, what I'll call, the actual conditions versus just a blanket cost per square foot. We know that second-story space over the science wing, for instance, isn't going to cost as much as if you're building a brand-new addition at grade where you're digging footings and all that, because it's that piece is already there for you. So we were able to make some reductions, and in doing so, what I want to be able to show you here, and break it out a little more, is what that new construction would be. It's the top number you see in the budget, which is 21.6. That includes all the new construction that you see there: the bus garage, the pool, the gym space, the tech space, that single-story middle school addition, and a pre-K addition there. Now, the reason I'm showing that renovation budget to be determined, when we looked at this previously, we were assuming that we were going to have some level of renovation throughout the campus, even if it's just freshening up with a coat of paint in spaces. Of course, we were going to look at energy upgrades, like swapping out lighting in rooms. Even if the room wasn't going to change, we wanted to do things to improve those spaces, make them more energy efficient, more usable classroom space. So one of the things I want to walk through with this alternate today is I want to ask you some questions about, out of the existing space that you have, how big of a need do you see to renovate some of the current spaces? Because in my mind, there are some spaces that need some extensive renovation, and others that, boy, we don't need to do a whole lot to them. Granted, those are the newer portions of the campus, but for instance, let's just think about your new gyms. There's work that could be done there, but it isn't going to be nearly as extensive as what we would, for instance, need to do in the high school building here, where we have rooms that aren't as large. And then for a space like the auditorium, that's a space, it's a large volume of space. It doesn't get used, I'm going to say, nearly as often as other spaces on campus. And if we were to start to talk about, if we had to pick and choose where money is going to be spent, is that a space you maybe don't want to do as much work in? So we're kind of getting to that level of detail with the budget now, where I'd like to, instead of using a blanket renovation cost for your existing square footage, I'd like to know what your thoughts are about, what can we live with, and what do we really think needs to be worked on.
What are they getting for that 21 million again?
It's,
For new construction?
yep, that includes all the new construction, which should, I guess I'll start at the top. It would be the 24 stall bus garage, be a second story on that science wing. It would be the industrial arts space. Here, I might use this, 'cause I got it. Industrial arts, pools, 2 new stations of gym, the middle school addition for 7 and 8, and the pre-K addition there, and then some commons and media center space in the red at the core there. So that's just the new construction piece. There's a lot more of the existing campus here that we kept in the effort to try to get that number down and try to save some cost. Namely, that auditorium and the classrooms below it. The significant amount of space that we decided to keep. And like I said, in looking at the square footage you have more extensively, we feel that we can have that middle school addition be a single story instead of 2. We've got enough space in that existing, essentially the classrooms that are underneath the auditorium we're able to use now, and we don't need that second story in the middle school.
And I see area per student is 358 square feet, so that's still 100 square feet a student more than we need, right?
Correct, compared to the state averages, and a lot, like I mentioned before, a lot of that has to do with the fact that that includes the entire footprint of Franklin, that basement, that isn't used by students, but it counts. Same thing with the high school. So that's the reason you're above and beyond what they recommend there, is some of those, I'll call it, inefficient existing buildings.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Cafeteria, where's that going to be, where it is right now?
Yep, so we've got the
Is
cafeteria.
that going to be your main cafeteria?
I'm anticipating that that red space next to it, which would become the commons, would be able to be used for that as well.
Because that space is not big enough now to be
Correct.
in there.
Which is
Plus,
why,
there's no place to cook any food there.
yep, so which is why I anticipate that that red space you see there, that commons is going to, that's where I allocated the square footage for that cafeteria to function there as well.
And how much bigger is that?
I'm looking at, I believe,
8,641 square feet?
I got, yeah, so actually a little over 6,000 square feet in there.
Oh, 6, okay, looks like an 8.
Sorry,
It's
yeah,
okay.
with the texture on the wall, it looks.
Glasses to it.
So, that was the thought there, is that we
Because right
expand.
now, it's not big enough even just for the
I
senior.
agree, yep.
Should
So
be
we
double.
So we definitely, we have new media center and common space right up front at that entry there that can function for that. And not that this is set in stone, but I mean, it's just blocks of space, we wanna make sure we get it the right size and the square footage that it needs to be, so we can work on that budget number to
So
something that's
we're
comfortable.
going to keep the existing kitchen in Franklin
Right now,
and transport food over?
I know that's what they do now,
They do that now.
yep. So,
And even that is
yeah, it's not.
not desirable.
No, but instead of, before I went ahead and demoed that kitchen and built a new one, I want to at least have that conversation. The kitchen isn't,
That is, and it's a big kitchen.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That addition was put on, I want to say the late 90s or so.
Which, this one?
The kitchen at
The high school?
the back of the Franklin.
Back to Franklin?
Yep, that addition back there. Late 90s, early
No, I think it's older than that.
I think so. Okay, I thought it was in the late 90s or so, like that. So right now, I'm anticipating reusing that existing kitchen again to try to have that as a somewhat of a cost savings measure as well, but that is something we could take a look at if you wanted, or felt the need for a new one.
And I have to, because right now they use the commons area down here for almost half the kids. And they're selling stuff that cafeteria isn't allowed to sell,
Oh, sure.
because it's not a true kitchen.
Okay, we can break that out.
No, it's just for, just think about it,
Sure.
I think the classrooms are just as important as the cafeteria, because that's usually where everything happens, you know, when they're all together.
Well, we are talking about redundancies, so, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big part of this conversation, right? Spending money and having redundancies on the single campus seems a little ridiculous not to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
One thing I will ask too, in this scenario, I mean, how do how do we address our entrances? Are they gonna pretty much stay this way they are?
Nope. I don't anticipate them being that way at all. I would expect, oh, here. Let's just use for discussion's sake, the the diagram for a new school. And you can see here, we have separate entries for pre-K through 5 on the left, 6 through 12 on the right. We have bus drop-off below, and you can see parking coming in from either side. So it separates those grades, and it splits them down the middle. So I would like to see a scenario, and granted it's an existing campus, it's a little tougher, where we could still have a drop-off for the Franklin, and then a middle school, high school drop-off over this way, and separate that traffic. You know, and granted, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but yes, I would anticipate that we're going to look at 2 separate entries, and then also be able to address, as we know, the security questions that we have here with that.
I guess that's, the other reason why I asked is because if we're gonna keep a large part of the existing properties, I mean, we've been kicking that can down the road for 20, 30, 40,
Make sure it
forever.
works. Yeah. And the couple of things.
Landscape just isn't set up, I mean, the way we're set up now is not real conducive to
No.
high-quality security. It's just not, I mean,
Just
it's,
logistics, I mean, it's just a horrible.
the logistics of the layout is more.
Yeah. And just to jog your memory from last time, on this particular plan, we would still need to look at the track and field function happening somewhere else. And one thing I can say is your savings and your O&M costs are, we've got a little over $760,000 a year. As Mona mentioned, your cost, or your area per student is 358 square feet per student with this one. Whereas the previous option, you know, a greenfield new school, of course, you can get that area per student right down to where it needs to be. We're at 252 here, and your O&M savings is, let's call it $1 million. However, you know, that's with entirely new construction. So of course, the upfront price tag is more to gain those savings and have those efficiencies there.
So 40 million more for a $250,000 a year savings.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say that there wouldn't be any renovation here, but I think the window of what it could be, we were budgeting somewhere between, depending on the space, between $150 and $175 per square foot for renovation. With the last option I showed you, you know, if we have spaces like the auditorium, let's just say, you know, the gyms even, where we have relatively minor renovation, we can drop that quite a bit. And I think make decisions based on a target is what I'm getting at. So that's one of the outcomes I'd like to get today is, you know, not that everybody has to agree even, but I'd like to have a conversation at least about, you know, what's your gut feel for, what's the comfort zone, even a window of cost that you think you'd be comfortable bringing forward to the public. We talked last time about how the ceiling is at the 71, I think it was somewhere. So we know what the ceiling is. We know we have to be below that, of course. But I'm curious to know if there's something we can work towards, even a range of costs. We can start to make some informed decisions on that renovation piece of it. Well, before we get to that, I'll maybe look at the option number 3 here, which is looking at a pre-K through 12 campus in Gilbert. And here again, we've got a really tight site, and you guys know that we've got about 13 acres there. And actually, when I looked at the survey, we're at, I actually call it about 12 acres, but we'll say 12, 13 acres there. Whereas in Eveleth, we've got 24 acres over there. A little more breathing room over there in terms of the site. So even when we make everything multiple story here, we end up filling out virtually every corner of this site with almost all of it being two-story space to get it to fit on this campus. And what ends up having to give is that outdoor space. You know, we held on to an elementary play area that you can see here. We've got some athletic fields there, and then parking would have to be relegated, you know, across the street basically. And this is, of course, assuming we're working with the property you have. If there's any site acquisition, of course, that would change things. But as it's been mentioned before, those triangles of space over there are really not usable because of the change in grade over there. It's the hillside, and it's not an easy space to make usable over there without some pretty extensive site work to try to get at that. So that's, I'm going to say, cost prohibitive in my mind. This option does look at maintaining that existing media center space, which is newer, of course. We would look at keeping the existing main gym and the shop and music addition over there. There again, in an effort to try to keep some of that existing space that's a little more flexible. There are larger rooms that we can work with. And then the Nell Sheen Elementary we're showing being held on to as well. Well, it says 3 stories. It's a similar situation to the Franklin, where that lower level really isn't space that's used by students. It's the main level and the upper level that are used for classrooms. So there again, because of the amount of square footage that's needed on this campus to get to where you need to be for the right size campus, you know, we're looking at over $50 million. It's 52.7 just on the new construction side. So there again, we can talk about the level of renovation, but in new construction dollars alone, just to get to where you need to be, it's a substantial price tag on this campus. And again, there's still some things that don't fit. You know, the athletics, be it football, baseball, softball, all would need to be off-site. I'd compromise on the pool a little bit and reduce it by a couple of lanes, things like that. So.
One thing I see missing,
Pardon?
bus garage.
Yeah, and actually what I'm listing here is that I think if we're going to look at having industrial art, because I didn't previously show industrial arts on this plan, because honestly we just didn't have a place to put it. And I thought, well, a lot of other campuses have that bus garage offsite. Yours is across the street here. So if you know, the school owns that property, I said, why not take a look at having that industrial arts addition come into that footprint of the existing bus garage. So that new construction cost is shown here for the industrial arts addition. However, that means you have to have an off-site bus garage in this scenario. So, yeah, some things to think about. We are still looking at, you know, the area per student is, you know, down at, because we have a lot more new construction here and we're able to, we have less in terms of the existing, you know, more inefficient buildings. We're at about 305 square feet per student. And then our change in O&M costs is $978 and change per year. Again, because we've got a lot of new square footage that's more efficient with this scenario. But that upfront price tag, again, you pay for it upfront. So those are the 3 that we had talked about looking into further in this way. So all 3 of those numbers, I'm sorry, the first number of course didn't change, but the options 2 and 3 had come down quite a bit, especially option 2 when you start looking at new versus renovation. And that's really where there's a big range in terms of what you can do is that renovation space, or space that you renovate. So we have a lot more flexibility with that, whereas the new construction, it's less so.
certainly gonna be the first time I was around. I don't recall us considering option 3 anymore. I thought we were looking at a downsized version of 2 campuses with, you know, a grade configuration change.
We did, and those were options 4 and 5. But the direction I had from last time was we were looking at 1, 2, and 3, and we were putting 4 and 5 on the back burner. And then 4 and 5 were the multiple campus options, the first of which had the grades configured the way you do right now, and the second of which was looking at reallocating them to have pre-K through 6 in Gilbert and 7 through 12 here. But after the last meeting, we were, directed.
See, I thought that was the one that we were still reshaping, because I mean, this is not even movable here.
That's not what I had on my notes, I guess. I still have them, we can definitely dust them off and take a look at them. The cost of those 2 options was much more.
I know, but we were that one was, there was dream building going on, right? We had talked about a far less ambitious plan.
And the notes I had from that conversation was that the reason we wanted to have those 2 on the back burner is that you still have the
There's
redundancy.
lots of redundancy.
And,
But I'm just saying that's what some board members asked.
Yes, I didn't have it noted that way in my notes, but we can definitely do that. We've got them, we can dust them off and come back with those options revised if you like as well.
We're not looking for those options. I mean, I think we understand that what we're doing right now is, there's no configuration that's going to work with it. I think they did ask for a grade configuration change, elementary there and high school here.
And streamlining, getting rid of the parts of the school we don't need.
Yep.
And even if we looked at mothballing, the old building, I don't remember us having option 3 still on the table.
Yeah. Like I said, well, at least the notes I had was that we were going to continue to look at explore 1, 2, and 3, and that options 4 and 5 we were going to have on the back burner. So those 2 options.
I thought the same thing, so
Okay.
that's the way I remembered it.
All right. Well, then I've got those here, and like I said, we can definitely look at scaling those back if you want to have that conversation.
Before it was just to downsize both campuses, wasn't it?
Same configuration.
With the same grade configuration, and
Just
5 was
eliminating
to,
some space.
and 5 was to reconfigure the grades. Well, yeah, like we discussed. So you guys still want to look at that as an option?
Well, I mean, if I may, can we start a conversation, or?
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Well, just,
No, that's what.
I don't wanna burn up the time.
I know, everybody good.
But my whole thing is, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this, so the cheapest scenario is $20-some million. We're deficit spending, on average, about $500,000 a year. So we're gonna go into debt $20 million to save that deficit spending, basically, and our payback's gonna
Well,
be.
it'll be more than that, because we have to buy the land yet for that part.
No, the $20 million, that's the Eveleth campus, everything,
Oh, that.
you know what I'm saying, option 2.
Option 2.
So I'm just using the cheapest example to say, if you throw $20 million up front, who's gonna pay for that? We gotta go for a referendum, right?
Mhm.
So the taxpayers gotta pay for that. Going too much further, I'd like to know what the average person's gonna have to pay, you know, what the function of their taxes are. And then B, if we gotta go into debt for $20 million, can't we just go to the taxpayers and say, hey, we just wanna up our operating referendum and keep her going the way we are? $20 million, no matter how you shake it, if the taxpayers gotta pay for it, it's a huge number, you know?
Big chunk, yeah.
Are they gonna exponentially go up because it's $20 million versus if we just ask for more operating referendum? Or am I talking out of 2 different functions? I don't understand,
That'd
you
be a
know?
question for Kathy, wouldn't it? How much or is she let into this yet?
That's not Kathy.
That's not.
But
Kathy.
is there a difference between asking for $20 million for capital expenditure, and that number is different than just upping our operating referendum? Is that,
As far as the difference between like a bond referendum
or just
and an
like
operating
per
referendum?
year? What, is it gonna cost more for our taxpayers to spend $20 million, or can we ask them for $500,000 to keep kicking the can down the road? You know what I'm saying? I
And
mean,
what that
out
number
of their
is,
pocket.
you're gonna have to ask your bonding agent and, you know,
Is it all the same number, but we're just gonna get a better school out of the deal, or is it gonna be cheaper for the taxpayers to try to cough up $50 to keep inefficient schools, or is it gonna be $100 to have a more efficient school? You know what I'm trying to say? I mean,
Just talking off the top of my head without having any facts behind it. My guess would be that we don't have the capacity to increase our operating referendum that far.
so that capacity is different than capital buildings and grounds capacity, is what you're saying?
Yeah, if you're looking for another $500,000 a year, because we're currently at 742.
Okay. So we can go in debt, more debt than we can go year to year operating, is what you're saying. Because we have 71 million that we can go into debt, right?
Right, but that's spread out over
Right.
X amount of years.
Yeah, I get that.
And
It's
The
like-
operating levy is only what, 10?
7.
7 years. It has to be renewed. If it doesn't get
But that's
renewed-
only, the operating levy's over, what, 3 years or 5 years?
7.
7.
Or 7 years? And but, capital expenditures over as much as the bond is, 20? So basically, we're just financing our inefficiencies. It's how I'm kind of looking at it, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think we should look at it a little different, in that we're dealing with aged educational facilities that need, something needs to be done. Whether, you know, whatever you look, I mean, maybe you don't agree with remodeling and you want new, or you don't agree with new and you want remodel, or maybe you don't think we should be doing any of this, we should be looking elsewhere, and all of that is fine. But I think that's, to look at it as we're going into $20 million of debt, I don't know that that's the way I would look at it.
do we have debt right now? I mean, we have
We
some.
have $142,000 of debt that will expire at the end of this fiscal year.
I mean, I guess I just look at that to where, I mean, if we stay, this is just speaking, if we stay like by ourselves, our taxpayers are the only, like, funding mechanism, right? Versus like the whole co-location or consolidation, I mean, then you can get grants, or there's other directions for funding, or is there other directions for funding to build a new school internally too? Or do
If
we-
you're looking for remodeling, there are some different mechanisms. I mean, if you're looking to build a new school, I mean, that is by ourselves, instead of, well, you're going to the voters.
It's straight up the public, our local public.
I mean, there's, if you wanted to do something, you know, if we wanted to add on a $2-3 million wing for middle school or something, I mean, there's some options there. There's a lease levy, there's other things that we can do. I mean, any way you look at it, it is a taxpayers that pays for it. It's just
Well, right.
what the mechanism is.
Well, I mean, I think locally it's on their property taxes, but if like the state comes in and funds it, I mean, it's kind of indirectly, right, because there's,
Well,
you send your money to the
See,
state.
and this is why we should probably have, at some point, we'll have, Bill Katie's, that I think we worked with forever, but I mean, if he doesn't, there's other outfits that can come and explain to you funding mechanisms, because I mean, there's lots more to it. I mean, if we were to pass a bond, I mean, 100% of that isn't directly affected by our local taxpayers. I mean, there is a state match to it as well.
And that's what I would like to know, is, I mean, everybody complains about their taxes now, the mines and taconite, and, I mean, the city of Gilbert, there was torches and pitchforks going on just recently on,
Yeah,
I mean,
yes.
so, I mean, in that conversation, I mean, it would be nice to qualify these numbers, what it means to somebody, you know?
But I think
They're
we
just
need-
dollars, but they mean something, you
But
know?
I think before we take that step, we need to kind of frame, you know, what are we serious about? What are some options that we're serious about? And then bring somebody in and say, what is this going to cost?
So what was option 4?
We had looked at maintaining 2 campuses, and option 4 looked at keeping the grades configured the same way they are right now.
And what was option 5?
Having 2 campuses, but changing the grade configuration to have pre-K through 6 in Gilbert and 7 through 12 in Eveleth.
So it'll be busing back and forth.
just like you do now.
Yeah.
And probably maybe even some teachers, right?
No, if it-
No,
if we
that
figure the grades,
configuration,
that'll
no.
go in.
I mean, I look at this, you talk about, you know, what was option, was closing Gilbert campus, this right here, option 2 is closing Gilbert campus
Yeah.
and going to 1,
And option three is the other way around.
which I don't think 3 is possible. But your option 2, I mean, I don't, that'd be tough for, you know, I mean, the citizens of Gilbert,
It'd be a tough sell.
it's very, very tough sell to close their school.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm against it for the simple reason that, you know, I mean, it would destroy the town, basically. I mean, you're gonna close your school, then you're gonna ask them for money to build a new school in Eveleth, or add on.
Yeah,
That's just ridiculous.
we're just looking at stuff right now.
No, I'm just saying,
Not ridiculous.
no, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like tripping over a 20 to pick up a 5, when you got the buildings already there.
Getting back to the discussion on the operating levy
Mm-hmm,
and the capital or the bonding,
mm-hmm.
will not the operating levy cease if we go for the bond? Are we still gonna need the operating levy
Mhm.
8 years from now?
We might not, I mean, the board can choose to expire that if they don't need that anymore. I mean, right now, we're taking in about 400,000 a year that way.
But isn't that one way of looking at the operating levy of 700 some thousand? Isn't that what it is that we raised? Did you say 700 total?
That's what
Well,
we've
it's
seen.
700, and I believe we're at 740 per student,
But one
which
way
isn't
of
the
looking at
maximum, but
the use of that operating levy is to help offset our excessive operating costs.
Right.
So if our operating costs are reduced by something close to what the operating levy brings in, is that not a wash? And would we need to continue?
We might be able to expire it. It would depend on a lot of things.
Yeah, so we used to try that, and now they have to go for an operating levy because they don't have enough money, because they don't have enough kids, because it keeps dropping.
Right.
That's the other part of this,
Yeah.
when the
That's-
demo study comes
Yeah.
through, what
So
our
I don't know if it would
projected
be a wash or not.
enrollment
It's-
looks like.
I mean, you just never know. It could be, it couldn't be. It's a crapshoot.
I mean, if you do that option, it's just like, you would think that your enrollment would decline, just because people, you know, I mean, you got three buses parked downtown for Gilbert in the morning, picking up kids. Pick your bus, you know what I'm saying? Basically what it is. I mean, you don't wanna shoot yourself in the foot, you know what I'm saying?
Well, we haven't decided on anything.
I know that, I'm just saying,
Don't worry, I've looked at every option.
I'm sure you have.
Would I wanna see our district survive, but I don't know.
Yeah.
We haven't decided.
No, I know, but
I mean, have we ruled out talking to our neighbors completely yet?
Well, you know what Virginia said? Yeah, if we can't walk to their school from Chestnut Street, we don't wanna do anything.
But that's the upfront conversation, is that the way it would shake out, you know, I mean.
Yeah, I would say yes. Every time we've had a talk with them, that's the way it ends up.
I guess I'm just gonna keep throwing out there that that's a big carrot that the IRRB has to work with our neighbors, and I think that should be a viable option to at least ask, you know.
Well, I'm not against asking, but I can tell you right now what they're gonna say. They'll start out schmoozing you at the beginning, and then it'll switch over,
When is Mountain Iron's election? March
just like
3rd?
it usually is.
no, option 1 was the same piece of property then, this building,
No.
or was it a whole different?
That's all new.
Okay, where was that, where was
We don't
it?
know, we haven't got any
Okay,
plans,
all right,
but that's a lot more money. That's, 63 $million, and that doesn't include the site and prep.
okay. And there was any sites available
We
or
don't know, we
anything?
haven't even found anything or been looking seriously, because we don't know which option they're doing. Because we're gonna need probably close to 50 acres.
Mhm.
I don't know where we can find 50 acres around here, somebody's gonna give to us.
I mean, that's a nice thought.
Yeah.
You know, I
You
mean,
know how the state, they'll just give it, they give land away all the
yeah,
time.
they do, yeah.
Okay, moving on, what should we do here?
Well, Ryan, one of the questions you asked early on is if we are thinking of any renovation for the auditorium.
Yeah, and
That currently, what is the capacity for the auditorium?
I don't have a chair count there, I have to do some digging.
Well, 550.
If,
550?
It's about 550.
we really are looking at enlarging it, right? I mean, it would just be the existing
Yeah.
space.
So a lot of these.
What kind of things are you thinking of that we could do to the auditorium?
Oh, and then
Lighting, sound,
that's
everything.
part of my question is, what kind of upgrades do you wanna make in those existing spaces? Because there's a wide range of what that cost could be. And, of course, you know, if we're looking to keep the number down as low as we can look at minimal work there. However, if we think there's some important deficiencies, be it for accessibility or lighting or whatever the case may be, then that we'll put a cost to it that's a little heavier than.
But having been in Mount Iron's new auditorium, where the seating is spacious and comfortable, and the lighting and everything, if we're gonna be looking at doing any renovations, I think it should be that type of thing. And that would reduce the number of seats.
We previously,
Capacity?
we previously looked at having this existing area demolished.
Excuse me, Mark, did you say reduce the number of seats in our auditorium?
If we made the seating more, the legroom more spacious,
Oh.
and a little bit, again, I'm just comparing it to what's in Mount Iron's new auditorium, and how much more comfortable it is being in there.
I just,
All the creature features that go into it.
I get it, I just have flashbacks like when we had our little elementary, sing thing, and it's like how cramped it was in there. Just throw it
I know,
out there.
I know, but
Well-
then maybe, like we talked, we change the way we do that.
Right.
And maybe it's only one grade at a time,
Yeah.
So
and then the next day it's another one.
this block of space here is that existing auditorium and the classrooms below it. And in the interest of trying to reduce that upfront cost,
So it'd be really sweet if you were there 6 days then.
yeah, I looked at keeping that existing auditorium and the classes below it, and, because a couple of the concerns were accessibility, being able to get props and set pieces up and down was a concern. On the flip side, you know, there was comments about, you know, how often it gets used, and is that the best bang for our buck? So, right now, I'm showing us keeping the existing one, and if we can look at renovating it, that's fine. If you still feel strongly that you wanna have a new auditorium that can seat 1,000 at grade, that's completely accessible, you can, you know, have a backstage door to bring your set pieces in and all that kind of stuff, let me know. But from what I heard last time and wanting to get that price down, this is the direction
Media center, is that on grade, or is that?
Yep, that is. So that current media center, which is the old girls' gym, is
Yeah.
partially over the pools.
Yeah.
So it's a really awkward configuration, and the existing pools are gone, they're being demoed in this scenario. We have new pools going in, and of course that media center would need to be replaced as well. And I'm showing it right up front. One of the reasons there is that if you are interested at all in having that be something that the public can use, have it by the front door at grade, or have it used after hours, that kind of thing, that's the location where I'm showing it, so. And it's central.
Just thinking of the one, this one here.
What was the cost to redo the auditorium?
We haven't got
Oh,
it.
we haven't
I mean,
got
are there any
that.
preliminary numbers at all?
No.
You know, we've We had previously looked at a range of something between 150 to 175 bucks a square foot, but I personally think we could spend less than that. So, for our next steps, do we want to have folks start taking a look at that financial side of it? It sounds like, I heard a lot of comments about that, I guess I'm just gonna ask.
I mean, personally, I would like to know what it means to the public, what funding mechanisms are possible. A loan, or if there's a scenario to where we could work with a neighbor, I mean, what options are there? I mean, I'm ignorant to all this, I would like to just know what's available, and you know what, that's gonna decide for me is if, hey, you know what, maybe we need to go to the bar and have a beer with the superintendent of Virginia or something, you know, or smooth with a neighbor a little bit harder, because, I mean, it makes sense for the public and it makes sense for our region. If it doesn't, well then maybe we just figure out how to go it alone. I mean, obviously most of you guys went through the whole co-location conversation, but I don't know if you guys got far enough to know the crux of what those dollars and cents meant too for the public.
So the funding mechanism sounds like is what you're really interested in finding.
Right, I mean, I just want to know what options.
And then, like Jeff said, you know, there's different things to look at out there.
Depending on what you do, there's different things you can
It
do.
wasn't fun, was it?
But I mean, if
But at the end of the day, like I said, it's all,
Yeah.
okay.
Except-
Money isn't just gonna come falling out of the sky.
No, that's for sure.
But there's a direct cost versus kind of an indirect cost too, isn't it, depending on how you shake things and, you know, a straight up bond or.
Well, like Jeff said, there are certain funding mechanisms that have a potential state match for a portion
Yeah,
of
you
it.
go for a bond, I mean, there's an equalization rate, I mean,
Is it capped to a certain level, or could it go the whole way, the equalization?
whatever the bond is passed for. So I believe our rate in this district is 53%, so our taxpayers would be responsible, say it was $20 million, our taxpayers are responsible for 11, and the state would be 9, that type of deal.
And that would work all the way up to the 80 million or $70 million number basically?
Our top is 72, 73.
So,
But that's, you still gotta sell it to the state too, right? I mean, they
it
gotta,
has to go through a.
Correct.
they gotta agree with what
Review
we're
process.
doing.
Review and comment,
Review and
they call it, yeah.
Option 4 was keeping both campuses going,
In the current, yeah, with the current rate.
with downsizing
Yeah.
someone on both campuses.
Yeah.
And looking at that with a dollars and cents figure, maybe that might be easier to put out to the public.
Well, it didn't say that.
You wanna get hit them on taxes, you know?
Yeah, the savings there was much less.
Yeah, it was only a 200 and something, $1,000 a year. That,
Still fall prey to the same inefficiencies that we're currently
yeah.
suffering from.
What are the inefficiencies, Jeff?
Transportation is a big killer.
Which you're gonna have that anyway, regardless.
If you have two campuses.
Yeah. I mean, if you have one campus, you still gotta go to Gilbert to get your kids and drop them off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Is that right?
Yeah, so you'd be looking at, yeah, you were, for option 4, we were upwards, we were still over 400, we were 455 square feet per student. And the reduction in area was about 162,000, which resulted in a reduction in O&M costs of about 500,000 per year. However, the construction budget was
Considerably.
$80 million.
Yeah, it was a lot more.
Whereas option 5 was I guess worse so, I'm gonna say, we were still upwards of, 485 square feet per student. We reduced to 132,000 square feet. Our O&M costs went down 412,000, but the price tag was the steepest of all of them, at 87. So it's, and again, that's factoring in some pretty extensive renovation for what needs to happen to be shuffling those grades around here. I'm not saying that couldn't come down, but I'm going to say they're still going to probably be proportional when you look across the board at these options. So, the two campuses, like we said, there's a lot of built-in inefficiencies with them, and redundancies.
I think we all need to know what's the final, what's it gonna cost for a $50,000 house, 100,000, whatever, if we go with one of the 2, 3 options, whatever. We can't even decide on which option to go with yet. And we won't be able to until we know what the costs are gonna be.
But
As far as how much it's gonna cost each household.
Okay. And if you have somebody you've worked with, we'd be happy to sit down and talk through this with them.
I think we had Bill do it before, and we had,
And he makes it clear.
makes it very clear. Yeah.
You know, even if you went to one campus and you mothballed the Gilbert School, okay? Okay, what would happen in the future of the school? I mean, who's gonna be liable if the school goes into disarray? And then all of a sudden, now we've gotta tear this thing down, what happens there?
Same thing.
We have a
You know,
cost,
now this, yeah, you know,
we have a cost for demolishing either side, as well as, what's one thing I don't know is if, what you could potentially get if you sold it, that I just don't know. Okay.
Probably take a 5-minute break before our next meeting
Yeah,
starts.
let's do that. I don't know what to really do.
I mean,
It's a big step. In fact, I would propose that we actually not just focus on Virginia. I think we should focus on Montreal also. Because we share a common border with both districts.
it's on the east too.
It's not the east, but then again, you get into that killer, that transportation cost. I mean, it's.
I would say as a board member that I would think that, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to ask Jeff to reach out to our neighbors and see.
Well, I'm not saying it
where-
wouldn't hurt, but
Thanks.
we've reached out many times in the years. See you later. Thank you. So, yeah, okay, we'll take a short break then, before we go to budget and finance.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Did you get any direction there, Ryan, or we just kind of?
Well, it sounds like we're gonna work with whoever your financial bonding agent, that type of person is, to get them the information they need and help both answer questions any way we can there. So you guys have that side of the
The only one
equation.
that's feasible money-wise is this option too, but it wouldn't be I would have a hell of a time trying to sell it to myself or when somebody else.
Well, I just hope that
Well,
people
we have
take, I just want people to take the information where we are today, understanding that no decision has been made. And
No.
if we get, I think we
Turn
got
off
hung
that
up
light, turn it off.
on having to defend something that we haven't even
Yeah, we
decided
haven't-
yet, it's hard to
We
move.
haven't decided
That's all.
anything. There's too many options out. I mean, we actually started with 7 options last time.
Yep.
There was, we knocked it down to what, 4 or 5? Then it
Well,
was
it's
3.
3 for today, and
And now it's up to 4.
like I say, we didn't say that we were ruling them out, we just said we're gonna put them on the back burner while we were
Yeah.
focused on some others, so.
I actually don't remember that.
That's a big person, right? Can't we get a convention down to, where we can look at it, we're not looking at a wall? We can go home and we can look at this thing and, I don't know, maybe, I don't have a full stack, can we? You take a picture with an iPhone,
Yeah.
can we get a still count? my wall version of it?
What I'll do, I will,
Where we're not looking at a wall?
yeah, what I'll do, I can, I'll talk to Jeff and get him the files that he needs.
Like I said, I mean,
Personally,
not only that, then, you know, if somebody does raise a question, you can, well, you can actually show a picture of what's out there. I mean, we're free to show it, anything. I got up to 100 degrees.
You, good,
I
good.
don't have an answer either, I don't disagree with you, I just, I'm gonna throw my hands up.
Hendricks wants me to go back under and
I just feel like we're stuck in the mud all of a sudden.
I'm gonna get a second opinion before I do that.
My wife is looking at knee replacement, I think,
You got the results already. You got the answer?
but I think what she
That's why
was
I
going
didn't bring
to do,
vacation
she was
tonight,
going
'cause I
to
was
do
doing something.
the Briscoe Salt.
Well,
And I usually come prepared, I.
you know where this one's gonna go.
Oh, yeah.
She did, and instead of doing this decision.
Match up.
Oh,
Oh, boy.
This is gonna be.
she's going back.
Wanted to make